All I can say after Saturday is I love it when a plan comes together. Oh, yeah, it's locked on Horned Frogs. Play my music.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Horned Frogs podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything TCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrien Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. We close out today's episode with the Monday mailbag that I talked about all last week, and you flooded the comments. Thank you, because we have quite a few to respond to. Segment 2 takes a look at the toughest stretch in TCU's schedule and how it could define the offseason for the Horned Frogs. But this whole thing kicks off with a little tribute to the A-team, a little tribute to Hannibal, because we love it when a plan comes together. You take out the cigar. Instead of waiting until the end of the episode, we do it at the beginning, because Saturday was really good for TCU. Matter of fact, I think TCU had almost as perfect of a Saturday as they could have imagined, and this is kind of a full circle moment for me. So the first time I did this show, it's hilarious to me now. I sit back and I look at the quality and I laugh. But before we go on this journey, let's look at the full circle moment from the very first episode I did and how I took the approach from a bye week. TCU was a bye week loser this weekend, and not because of anything that happened with them. They didn't even play, but everything they wanted to happen around them didn't. Oh yeah, it's Locked On Horned Frogs. Now, it's adorable to me. Look how bare the walls were. If you look close enough, you see a little purple tint from I have a purple lamp in here, and you see a little bit of a purple tint. I thought it was so cool. I just needed some light, but it was a dope way to tint it. This was the first episode I did, and I said that TCU was a bye-week loser. The first time I graced this mic, it's the first thing you even heard me say. Well, I come here about a month and a half later to tell you that TCU on their second bye week are unequivocally bye week winners, because almost everything you wanted to happen, Cincinnati lost, Houston lost. You're going to need perfection and luck if TCU has any hopes of making it to the title game in Arlington. You're going to need perfection and luck. You can't go with one or the other. You need both. And luck is already a little bit on their side, because Houston was not supposed to lose to West Virginia. I'm not supposed to be sitting here today talking to you on November 3rd about a 2-loss Houston Cougar. I'm not supposed to be doing that. I'm supposed to be talking to you in a couple of weeks about TCU trying to make Houston a 2-loss team. But now that we sit here going into the Iowa State week with with Houston being a 2-loss team, that makes TCU's path a little bit easier. It doesn't make it easy. It doesn't make it easy at all, because what? TCU needs perfection and luck in order to make it to Arlington for the Big 12 title game. And they already had a little bit of luck. I highlighted a couple of games to look out for. The only thing that didn't go their way is the Arizona State game. That's the only thing that didn't happen that TCU really needed, is Arizona State came out and they beat Iowa State. That was unfortunate. I would have wished that it went the other direction. That way Arizona State could have been a 3-loss team. I genuinely believe when the season is over, regardless of what happens, unless they just crash and burn, TCU is going to look back and regret that Arizona State loss. I talked about it, I think, a couple of times before, but I specifically talked about it on last week's episode. TCU is up 17 points in that game and drop the lead. Take the lead out of it. TCU has a chance to go win the game. Josh Hoover has 2 legacy moments, and they both turn into turnovers. Not only does Josh Hoover have 2 turnovers in the last 2 possessions, one set up Arizona State for the game-winning score, and the other one set them up to just kneel out the game. So the last 2 times that TCU touches the ball, Josh Hoover turns over the ball. I don't think that happens but 1 or 2 times in 100 simulations. That's just not supposed to happen. That was a very ugly loss. It's a game in which you were up big, you feel like you're supposed to win. You have the ball in the hands of your star quarterback with the game on the line. You feel like you're supposed to win. And you just didn't. You just didn't. I think that that's probably the most regrettable loss that TCU has suffered thus far. And I argue it will be the most regrettable loss that TCU suffers this season. And right now, as we stand here today before that last month that I think is brutal, that loss to Arizona State takes you from being a one-loss team that's right in the mix, a one-loss team that if you're perfect, you do make it to the championship game, to a two-loss team that even if you're perfect for the rest of the season, you still need a good amount of help. And not only that, Arizona State didn't lose this week. Arizona State's a two-loss team that you're tied with. You need to break that tiebreaker. I don't want to go into a 4-team tiebreaker and try to figure it out, but I know that I don't want to be tied with a team that already beat me. This is a very regrettable loss, because it was there for the taking, and it also just had an ending that you just don't expect to see often, and I don't think you'll see it again. I do not think that Josh Hoover absolutely crumbles and cracks the same way that he crumbled and cracked against Arizona State. I don't even think that happens if they play Arizona State again. But it happened the one time they played them this season, and it's going to be something that really haunts Hoover, haunts TCU, and it has the chance to absolutely derail and destroy their championship hopes. Because what does TCU need in order to be a championship team? I'll give you a guess. One starts with a P, the other starts with an L. I'm just saying. Perfection and luck. All right. I'm just trying to give you the answers to the quiz here. But that Houston and that Cincinnati game, like I said, you already have luck on your side. Cincinnati loses to Utah, and it was a matchup where I was kind of on the fence of what do you really want in this game? Because let's not get confused. Utah is a 2-loss team too. And if I'm TCU, I want all the 2-loss teams to become 3-loss teams. And I want all the 0-loss teams to become 1-loss team. I just want everybody to keep working their way down. But the more 2-loss teams that you have right now, the more you need to go on, because some teams only have 3 games left on their schedule. Some teams don't have 4. So right now it stands Utah, Arizona State, and TCU are the 3 2-loss teams. They're the 3 ones. And I would have liked the Cincinnati's hard. Cincinnati has 0 losses. Them going down to 1 loss, I do think helps TCU, because now you don't have to worry about Cincinnati losing another game. Cincinnati's schedule looks like, if this thing pulls up quicker. All right, so they have Arizona, BYU, and TCU. I think they could lose to BYU and they could lose to TCU. That would be the greatest outcome for the Frogs, is that Cincinnati ends up as a 3-loss team. 1 less team in the mix for you. Texas Tech's a little bit difficult, but they do have BYU this upcoming week. That's a game to look. 11 a.m. I think game day is going to be there for those who actually can watch ESPN. I can't. I can't watch ESPN. But for those who can, try to look at the game day environment. And then also, obviously, this game will be on ESPN if it's the game day game. So Texas Tech versus BYU is going to really shape how we look at this entire conference, because BYU is 5-0. Texas Tech is 5-1. Those are the 2 teams that I think have been looked at as the class of the conference for the longest time. I think you have some other teams occupy that spot, but Texas Tech, BYU are the 2 teams who are at the top of the conversation the most this season. Cincinnati, they're 5-1. We already went through their schedule. BYU going undefeated is fine with me, because BYU goes undefeated. That means that they've defeated. Well, actually, I guess they shouldn't go undefeated because they play TCU, but they beat Tech and Cincinnati. If they can beat those 2 teams, you're good. Now Cincinnati and Tech are 2-loss teams. Now, if you beat Cincinnati and BYU, we're having a different conversation. Utah, we can skip over Houston because they play TCU. Who cares now? Utah has Baylor, Kansas State, and Kansas. That's the tough part. And Arizona State has West Virginia, who just upset Houston, Colorado, and Arizona. I don't know if they lose another game. That's the thing. That's very difficult. is when it comes to the Big 12, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams with 2 or less conference losses, and TCU is one of them. This is the ultimate, but you're telling me there's a chance moment. Because, yes, you lost to Arizona State. That's unfortunate. I don't know how you get out of that in a 3-way tie, 4-way tie, whatever, 3+. Utah, 2-loss team. Houston, 2-loss team, but you played Houston. So if you can beat the Cougars, you just go ahead and knock them out the equation. You play Cincinnati at 5-1. If you can give them their second loss, and let's just say that BYU beats them, their 3 losses, and they're out of here. Texas Tech versus BYU, I'm probably rooting for BYU if I'm a TCU fan, just so that, and honestly, I don't know if it really matters in that game. I don't know if it, like, when you start talking about BYU or Tech, that gets into a large conversation of basically 4 or 5 team ties. I'd probably root for Texas Tech just because you can beat BYU. But that's the biggest toss-up this week. And that's something that you'll have to determine how many teams you think are going to be in the tie. Do you think it's going to matter? But you need to beat BYU no matter what. Because what, ladies and gentlemen? You need perfection and luck. You already got the luck with West Virginia, a team that had won no games in conference play. They had beaten nobody in this conference, yet they came in and they beat Houston, a team that was competing to be a part of the Big 12 title game. And they're still going to compete for that. That's not over for them. But West Virginia came in and knocked them off in the biggest upset that I could have imagined over the weekend. That was luck for TCU. I'm not going to say it's lucky for West Virginia. Maybe Scotty Fox has finally found some mojo. Maybe the Mountaineers finally have a quarterback after so many attempts. But that's exactly what was needed for TCU, and it's what none of us expected. Raise your hand right now if you expected West Virginia to beat Cincinnati. Don't worry. I'll tell you a little bit more about them people who paying us the bread, a little bit more about game time. I promise you'll still have your hand down as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time, and I'm trying to go see Jitty Jid when he comes out to Irving. Anybody who's in the area, no JID, trying to go, whether you're in DFW, whether you're in the Arlington area, whether you're in that Midlothian, it's in Irving, all right? It's in Irving at the Pavilion. You go ahead and get some tickets. If you see me, holla at your boy. If you don't see me, let me know you're there, and I'll come holla at you. But either way, you got to get them at Game Time. That's not even a question. Or maybe you want to go to the Cowboys game that is tonight. Cowboys versus the Cardinals. Because you can't watch it on ESPN, might as well go live, right? You know what I'm saying? Maybe you want to go to a Mavericks game. Maybe they have some events at Dickies Arena and you're local to the Fort Worth area. Whatever it may be, sports, music, theater, ballet. I love the Monster Jam example. The circus. I had circus tickets. The missus and I went last year, got them from Game Time. The versatility on this app is amazing, and it's only second by the deal they give you. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege, and you get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day, for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Big 12. I am almost certain, with absolute certainty, that they are talking about this Houston game. I'm pretty confident they're talking about Houston versus West Virginia on Monday because nobody saw that coming. But now that we've established what it is that TCU needs in order to make it to the Big 12 championship game, I told you this is the ultimate. So you're telling me there's a chance moment. Because it's still a long shot. It's still very difficult. I don't know, once you get into like Arizona State, like you could end up in a tie with Arizona State, Utah, Cincinnati, BYU, Texas Tech. Like you could ultimately end in such a 2-loss logjam. I don't want to get into tiebreakers yet. I just hope that by the time we roll around and, the second to last game, we know how much tiebreakers we need to talk about. But the truth is, none of what I said in segment 1 even matters if TCU cannot have perfection, because there's two things. You get the point. So TCU, they're going on their toughest stretch of the season. TCU is about to embark on their toughest stretch of the season, and it's at absolutely the worst time possible. I think having your hardest 4-game lineup. I dare you to go find a harder 4-game lineup in TCU's schedule than what they're about to do right now. And the toughest part about it is, yes, when you have it later in the season, technically you know your team. Technically, you should have a grip on what they do well, what type of play calls you need to have. I agree. There's that advantage, but there's also the health advantage. And I don't know if knowing your team is necessarily an advantage because they know their team too. So it kind of cancels out. The unknown is unknown at the beginning for both. The known is known for both. Like, you should be playing your best football right now, but you're also probably more banged up than possible. Or you're more banged up than you would have been earlier in the season. Let's get to this 4-game stretch, because when I say it's the toughest stretch, I don't really think there's a question. And I want to compare it to the other toughest stretch that you could have possibly had. So you have Iowa State, BYU, UH, and Cincinnati. That's the 4-game stretch you have right now. Versus Iowa State, you go on the road to BYU, on the road to Houston, and then you come back home in the season finale to play Cincinnati. This features 2 ranked opponents. You don't have a single ranked opponent on your schedule thus far. You have not played a team that was ranked. You have 2, one of which is a top 10 team in BYU, and the other is at 25 in Cincinnati. That's coming off of a loss. So that tells you how they were looked at prior to that loss. You have UH, who's a team who was ranked in the top 25. You have Iowa State, who's a team who was ranked in the top 25, but they done rattled off so many losses in a row that they've destroyed all of that. What's the tougher stretch? Obviously, anything with the FCS Abilene Christian game, get it out of here. And I don't think you would start before that with North Carolina anyway. Let's go after SMU, Arizona State, Colorado, Kansas State. Is that what we're going with? Because I feel like you going to trade in SMU for Baylor? And then you go Arizona State, Colorado, Kansas State, Baylor. You got to have Arizona State in there. Colorado, let's look at it this way. Your top team is Arizona State. You have 2 teams that are probably better than Arizona State in BYU and Cincinnati. So the 2 toughest games of your season are right now. Iowa State is equivalent to Kansas State in the sense that both of them had either high expectations or they had reached a certain height during the season, and there was an expectation from that, and then they just fell flat. For Kansas State, they fell flat immediately. They came out the gate flat. Soda top been cracked. But then you have Iowa State, who they kind of got bubbling for a minute before the soda went flat, before they just kind of like until that happened. And they've lost, I think, 4 games in a row. But at once upon a time, I think they were a top 15 team. But that's what happens when you knock off Kansas State, who we think, okay, they're not that great. You knock off South Dakota. You go to Iowa. You win that game. That's a solid win. Big Ten victory. Tough, gritty game. Arkansas State, who cares? Arizona State, you knock them off 39-14. And I'm a little bit higher on Arizona than others are, but still. Then you go and you lose to Cincinnati. You lose to Colorado. I don't know has Colorado beat anybody else? I don't think Colorado has beat anybody else in this conference other than Iowa State. And at that time, they were 22. And that was after a loss. So they haven't. They haven't beat anybody else in this conference, man. So anyway, the point is that Iowa State is a team that was competitive, fell off the same way that Kansas State was. What's the difference? I just see better opponents. I see better high-end opponents. I see UH as a team who at number 3, they are probably better than every other team on their schedule other than Arizona State and maybe SMU. But I'm going to say Arizona State. SMU is a quality win. They just knocked off top 10 Miami, but SMU, Arizona State, Colorado, Kansas State is getting absolutely washed in degree of difficulty by Iowa State, BYU, at UH, and then versus Cincinnati. And there's no real reason for me to stress at UH. I don't know if that's going to be a great home field advantage for the Cougars anyway. One of the things that Parker always talks about on the squad show is the fact that, Houston doesn't really have a home field advantage because everybody's biggest alumni base is already in Houston. So that may work for them. But this is going to define the season. And I didn't get into that. I just wanted to go into how tough it was. But the reason this is going to define the season, this last month of the schedule, Iowa State, at BYU, at Houston, and closing out against Cincinnati, against what I would say is 3 to 4 quality teams, probably leaning more to 3 because Iowa State has ate up their leash to still be considered a quality team. I think it may be a quality win for TCU, but you knock off UH or you knock off Cincinnati or you knock off BYU, and we have a completely different conversation. A completely different conversation. I'm saying this last month is pivotal because I think we should group it in, and I don't want to skip by Iowa State as if it's an easy victory. But the truth of the matter is that last triumvirate of games at BYU, at Houston versus Cincinnati, that's going to be the games that define how we speak about Sonny Dykes in the offseason. There have already been calls for, hey, man, go ahead and fire Sonny Dykes. Let's get him out of here. But I think that it's a whole different conversation if you beat BYU. I almost don't care what else happened prior to this last month. If Sonny Dykes and TCU go out there and they knock off either one of the Cougars, they knock off the Bearcats, they do that, it's going to be real crickets, in my opinion, when talking about the job security of Sonny Dykes. If TCU goes out there and they just beat BYU, they win the last game against Cincinnati. I understand that they're just going to be bowl eligible, and some people won't be happy with just being bowl eligible. But I would tell you this. It would be the first time this season that TCU knocked off a team that made you say, oh. And one of the gripes is that, oh, well, he never does it. And if you beat Cincinnati, if you beat BYU or you knock off UH, you're doing that on the road. You knock off BYU, you're winning in a hectic environment. That's a rocking crowd. That is a rocking crowd. And if you go in there and you win and you silence them, it's going to be other people being silenced. And I'm not talking about those who are supporting BYU. I'm talking about those who are covering TCU, those who are calling for the job of Sonny Dykes. I can't tell you that it's going to happen. It still feels like a long shot that you'll beat BYU. Feels kind of like a long shot that you beat UH, but not necessarily as much now. West Virginia just did it. You go through this stretch 3-1. You go through this stretch 2-2. 2-2 probably isn't going to look like a good record, and that may be too overwhelming. But TCU walks out of this 4-game stretch 3-1. I don't think anybody's talking about whether or not Sonny Dykes should or should not be fired. They're talking about how TCU really finished the season strong, and I can't wait to see what bowl game that they're going to. Matter of fact, I can't wait to see what it is that you have all been talking about in the Monday mailbag. So let's jump to it as we continue with Locked On Horned Frogs. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and right now, TCU are 6.5-point favorites at home. They say you get about 3 points at home, so it seems like they really believe that this game is going to be a field goal determined game. It's not a toss-up necessarily, in my opinion, but it is very close. They do think that Iowa State could knock off TCU, but playing in the Carter, they're going to give the advantage to the Frogs. They're going to say that you're at home, you're gonna knock this thing off. You're going to knock this team off, and excuse me, again, sneeze. But that's what you see on FanDuel. The NBA is here. Wemby, Curry, Bron, Luka, Anthony Edwards, Zion Williamson, Giannis Antetokounmpo. You got all the Nikola Jokic. You have all of these players, points, assists, rebounds, blocks, steals, team. And if you get halfway through the game and you're just now showing up, you can still do the live bets because they don't want you to ever miss out on the action, even if you missed out on some of the earlier action. Just go to FanDuel. Bet $5 if you're new and it wins. You get $300 back in bonus bets. It's simple. It's easy. It's just up to you to do it. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Today's been a really fun episode. We've gone full circle. We've looked at the first episode I ever did, and you know what? The same way FanDuel allows you to get on the action if you're getting late to the party, if you're late to the premiere, just look at this old clip down memory lane. TCU was a bye-week loser this weekend, and not because of anything that happened with them. They didn't even play. But everything they wanted to happen around them didn't. But everything they wanted to happen this week outside of one game went their way. I came in telling you that they were bye week losers a month and a half, 2 months ago, however long that it's been. But here I come to you today to say that the Frogs are bye week winners to start off November. And I even brought the hat to match with the jersey I wore that time. We're going all thematic, but this is fun. This is fun. This is good. I'm having a good time. But let's close out with a little Monday mailbag because I want to talk to you and I want to pick a couple of questions or a couple of comments that were left. This is Connor Dansport 1128. I actually have two from him, so I'll read them both. TCU won't lose to BYU or Houston and may beat Cincinnati too. I think that's bold prediction of the week. Bold prediction of the month, and November just started, is that TCU won't lose to BYU or Houston, which means they're going to go on the road and win both of those games. With how much we've talked about TCU and their road woes, that would be amazing. And if you go 2-2, and I don't know, you go 2-2, and those are the two games you win, but you lose both in the Carter, that might be tough. But I would say you go 2-2, you win one road game, you win one game at home. Like I said, I think it's a different conversation. The other thing that Connor said is they're capable of playing good football. They just don't do it all the time, and they're not going to be able to get away with that in this upcoming 4-game final stretch. They're going to have to play their butts off for 60 minutes, so we will see. Matter of fact, Connor, you can have my job. You can have my job because I couldn't have said it any better. They are capable of playing football, good football. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about how they're able to play complementary football. I just don't think they do it enough. I'm actually going to get into how complementary football is on the menu for TCU. They just don't flash it. They just don't show it all the time. Let's see. Bomber, I think that is. BAUMER 1986. I think you hit the nail on the head about consistency. I think they knew Belichick would take away McAllister, so they planned for that. When he was down with Barnes, other guys had to step up, and it wasn't great at Arizona State. However, I do think the day of undefeated champions is going to be unlikely with these new huge conferences. That's probably the more interesting part to me because we're going to talk about consistency tomorrow, and I already kind of told you we're going to talk about consistency tomorrow, and that's on me for forgetting that I was supposed to say their second Connor one last so I can naturally transition out of today. But the day of undefeated champions is going to be unlikely with these new huge conferences. I'll say this. BYU is looking like they just know how to win. So we'll see. Time will tell if the Big 12 kicks the curve or kicks the I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say. If they don't make it a trend, they kick the jinx or whatever, however you want to put it. I do think it's going to be tough. I think that more SEC schools are playing outside of their conference. I haven't noticed as much with the Big Ten top teams, but Ohio State did play Texas. And though Texas doesn't look that good, that was a huge game. That was a huge risk when scheduled. So I think that not only is it going to be tougher because you have more teams with NIL who are getting better, you're also having more schools feel more confident to go play other conferences' top schools. So I think because of that, because people are more open to doing that, they're more vulnerable to mistakes, and they're okay with that. They're okay with making mistakes. So yes, I do think it's going to be less undefeated champions, but at the same time, I think you may see an undefeated champion in literally I'm not going to say all 4 conferences, but the Big 10, SEC, and Big 12. I think you could see an undefeated champion in all 3 of those. So it wouldn't be shocking, but I think you bring up a great point of how the top will see some more losses than we're used to. Lastly is Josh Hoover's game against West Virginia, 0 interceptions, 0 fumbles. This is something I wanted to highlight because I don't think it's talked about enough by me, is that Josh Hoover had a mistake-free game against West Virginia. Just flat out. He had a mistake-free game, and it's something that we should highlight, something we should celebrate, because too often when you want something to be fixed and you're talking about the team and the things that are down, sometimes you don't necessarily acknowledge the things that are good. And I think that what TCU did with ball security against the Mountaineers was good. And we've seen that be a problem on the road before. Last one. If they don't fix cornerback, we would continue to get burnt. That's a position that's weird. The whole defense to me is a little bit weird. I oftentimes don't know how to gauge them. It feels like they play well, but then they have moments, and the cornerbacks sometimes feel like a weak spot, but then it felt like they disappeared for like a month. So it's very difficult, but I don't think that you're wrong in that. I didn't get your name. My apologies. That is Crispin Rodriguez -PX3 up. And the Josh Hoover came from Dunn R. Win 9306. So thank you guys for the Monday mailbag. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this again. It's very difficult. Maybe if you leave comments on a Saturday, I can come back in on Monday and do it. That's how we'll do it. I'll say it tomorrow. But it's very difficult to find a way to do interactive things on Monday because you're talking about everything that happened either for last week's game or 2 weeks ago at that point, or you're talking about things that are going to happen against the team you're playing on Saturday. That makes sense. So basically, it'd be hard for me to do it this week because you'll be talking about the bye week for the first half of this week. And then the second half, you're talking about what's going to happen versus Iowa State. I can't really come in and do a Monday mailbag on that after the Iowa State game. But what I can do is give every single opportunity to talk to you. So if you DM me, you tweet, whatever, I want to chat. Anyway, in the meantime, in between time, shout out to the bye week winners. Full circle moment, and we're pressing ahead. TCU goes into the toughest stretch of their season, and these 4 weeks may define how TCU is viewed. But tomorrow, let's get into why both sides can win a game for you and how that's kind of concerning when it comes to the TCU consistency. Oh, I can't wait for tomorrow. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.